Ladies and gentlemen, we're able to accomplish all that fine work in part because of our staff, who are fantastic, as I mentioned before. We are also very blessed to have an incredible board that brings together both foreign policy experts and people who understand politics. It's not on your program, but when we learned that one of our board members, Secretary Eagleburger, Secretary of State Eagleburger, was coming up tonight, we asked him to say a few words.
Henry, I don't know whether you're going to like all this or not, but anyway. Brent Scowcroft and I probably worked for Henry Kissinger more than most people in this room. And Brent is too weak to get up here on the stage, so I've been filling in for him. I want to tell you a little bit about Henry, and I think maybe the place to start is when I first went to work for him and he tried to break up my marriage. President Nixon went to Paris, and Henry went along, and I went along with Henry. And we spent some time in Paris, and then Henry sent one of his aides out to buy a gift for my wife. And it made me realize, oh my God, I haven't done anything. So I noticed that there were 5 very nice Chanel No. 5 bottles in the French place where we were staying. So I packed those up, took them home with me, and I gave my wife 5 bottles of Chanel aftershave. Well, Henry, of course, had given her some Chanel perfume or something, and it was a long time before I got over it. Or I could tell you about Henry's tolerance for mistakes, and that he never blew up, never lost his temper. I'm going to give you a classic case. We were on negotiating, again, I think it was in Paris. We were negotiating with the Vietnamese in the aftermath of that unfortunate war. And the Vietnamese representative and Henry got into an argument over a fact. And we were at tables with long lines of us on one side and the Vietnamese on the other, Henry in the center. And we had a particular member of our staff at this far end of the table. And Henry was in this argument with the Vietnamese fellow, and after about 2 minutes of this argument, the fellow down here at the end of the table said, "No, Secretary Kissinger, you're wrong. Mr. Hootsiwatz, whatever his name was, is correct. And if you look on page 36 of your briefing book, you will see that you're wrong and he's right." I sunk under the table as this began, but I was waiting for Henry's response, and there was a long, long silence. And then finally he said, "Stearman, pick up your chair and go to the other side of the table." It's from incidents like that that I learned so much of how to conduct diplomacy. And I don't want to spend a long time on all of this, but I do want to say I was very fortunate in my time in the State Department, because early on when President Johnson was president, he called Dean Acheson back to deal with France and NATO at the time that de Gaulle was leaving NATO, the military side of it. I was assigned as Dean Acheson's assistant, his staff. And despite the fact that he belonged to the wrong political party, which has gotten worse ever since, he was a great man and a great Secretary of State, and I thought that was going to be the quintessential experience of my life until I came to work for Henry Kissinger. And I must tell you, I never in many, many years experienced anything quite like that. Never learned as much as I learned, and I don't intend to go through a long history of Henry's successes, other than to say that I watched Henry Kissinger hold at least our foreign policy and probably most of the country together during the worst days of Watergate, when the president couldn't have ordered a platoon anywhere. And our worst enemies around the world never understood for 1 minute how weak we really were at that time. And it was Henry that did it. Or watching him agonize over Vietnam as long as he did and try everything he could to bring it to an end honorably. And nevertheless, we were not able particularly to succeed. But in that whole process, Henry gave a gift to the United States that we still, if we're wise on how we use it, will be terribly important in our future. And that is, he really is the man who broke the bonds of our bad relationship with the People's Republic of China. And if it weren't for Henry, we would not have the relationship we do with them now. Unfortunately, they would have maybe less of our money, but that's not Henry's problem. But the point is again that it's a relationship that's going to be critical to our future, and it is a relationship that, if we're wise enough to manage it the way Henry did, will be, in fact, a tremendous benefit to us as the years go by. I watched him also when President Ford became president, and I think he was a fine president, but he was not particularly adept at foreign policy in those early days. And I watched Henry teach a president of the United States a great deal about foreign affairs. And by the time President Ford left office, he was an adept. And again, it was Henry who had done it. Now, I'm going to end by saying to you simply that, in my judgment, the greatest Secretary of State of the 20th century, and perhaps of both the 19th and 20th centuries, is sitting with us now, and we'll never see his like again. God bless Henry.